I will call this meeting to order. Stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you all sign in, please? Holly?
All councilors present, with Councilor Stefano previously requesting to be excused, and a quorum has been declared.
Thank you. We'll move on to citizen comment. I don't have a regular agenda here, but I believe citizen comment is the next point of order. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, agenda approval, yes.
I move that we approve the agenda as presented, excusing Mr. Stefano from the meeting.
I second.
I've got a motion, a second. Any further discussion on agenda approval? Seeing none, start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Is the next order of business citizen comment? And we have quite a few cards this evening. Thank you for participating. I will have a strict 3-minute time limit tonight. So once your 3 minutes are up, I will turn off your microphone. First card I have here is no one other than our Ruthie Brown. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Ruthie.
Speak. There we go. Take it back 2 seconds, Eric. Anyway, I have mixed feelings, but I think the city needs to get after it. I'm kind of surprised that we're no further along with zoning and ideas and what we should allow in Alamosa than we were 2-3 years ago. It's not going to go back in the box. I'm not a user. Although I'd say, hey, if I need a salve, I grab a marijuana salve for pain control. In my neighborhood, I am much more concerned about meth and heroin and the alcohol abuse every single day. The number of tourists that come by the green spot because they think green means marijuana, there's a number of them, and they're good people. And I send them out of Alamosa and out of Alamosa County. So it hurts us. Having a garden center, a lot of my customers also raise marijuana. I'm not going to deny that. They're good people. I don't know what they do. I don't know if they're raising it in their garage or in a warehouse. I have not a clue. But I do know they are good people. Some of them need marijuana medically, some of it recreationally. And I think you would probably be amazed at the number of recreational users in Colorado. It's not a bad thing. Read some of the research. It doesn't scare me. I'm much more afraid of a person driving a car at me that's drunk than I am someone smoking weed. I'm much more worried about someone breaking into my store that is supporting a meth and heroin habit than I am someone needing a little bit of pot. So I think you need to direct Eric or somebody to do the research, do what you need to do, and get after it, because it's not going away. Whether you accept recreational marijuana this time, next year. I don't even know what cultivation, it's cold in the valley, so, and manufacturing, I think that could be people in their kitchen cooking, but they also have all their rules and regulations too. So don't be afraid and address it. Address it honestly.
Thank you,
3
Ruth.
minutes, put that down.
Yes. Next up, we have Daisy Valdez. Would you please approach the podium? Tell us your name and your address if you wish.
Thank you. Daisy Valdez, I live over on San Juan Avenue. And I just want to kind of echo what my previous constituent said. And I think that we've waited so long on this issue that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The data's out there. If there are counties doing what we like, we can copy that and implement it here at Alamosa. So I don't think that it takes all this research, all this data. I think it's been out there enough that just some conscious effort to really find out what's working, I think would make this issue move along quicker. I think that we are missing out on a tremendous revenue stream. And I agree, I believe that alcohol and some of the other things that are already legal actually do more damage to our community than marijuana. And the other thing that I would encourage is to go ahead and split the issue. I don't think it's a yes or no issue. I think that if we're strategic in what we ask, we will get the pulse of the community. Because there are individuals that do need it for medical reasons, but may not approve of the recreational side. And so I think that if we can be strategic, use the resources that are already out there and available, I think we can definitely get this issue on the ballot. I do think that it's important to try to get it on this ballot because we are going to have the highest turnout. It's a presidential election. That's just fact that we're going to have more turnout. And if we really want to serve the constituents, I think that that would be a better use of our time. Thank you.
Thank you, Daisy. Next up, we have Andrew Hobbs.
Hello, I'm Andrew Hobbs, County Road 10 South. I am not a city voter, but I just urge you to keep this simple. Come up with 4 questions. I'm not for recreational use. I am a medical user of it. I believe that a lot of the recreational has taken away from medical value of marijuana. I use a lot of salves, lotions, creams. Marijuana specifically helped me get off an opioid addiction. If anyone here knows what that's like, it's a long, hard road. You didn't have to have a petition to do a methadone clinic to help people get off of drugs, heroin, opioids, things like that. It's just something y'all did. Just really don't overthink it. The numbers are there. They've already been there. Proposition 64 passed overwhelmingly. It's kind of ridiculous we have to go through this again. This is going to be a good election year to have a high voter turnout. You will get a feel of what people want. Some people do not want recreational. Some people do. Some people don't think the manufacturing facilities will work in town. A lot of people do grow pot in their garages and things like that. It's just how it is. You can't have indoor grows in towns. It is feasible. Energy use, water use, all that stuff gets paid for. Open storefronts, how many are there? Those places could be filled with reputable businesses. We have walked down the city, down the streets of Alamosa. There is a lot of people who fully support having businesses beside their businesses. Haven't really heard much negative about it. Farmers Market, we've been there just about every weekend. A lot of good positive feedback there. You know, people are surprised. Alamosa does not have this. Oh, we have to go 30 miles north. We have to go 30 miles east. We have to go 30 miles south, or what, 60 miles west. It's kind of ridiculous. Myself, I have to travel pretty far just to go get my medical necessities. I believe that if you had more businesses available, it would help bring down cost of it, because right now it's expensive. In 3 years, I've spent over $14,000 out at the medical shop. That's me, and I'm not a major customer. I'm disabled. I don't work. My wife supports my family, so that keeps the government from having to pay for my medical pills, prescriptions, whatever, because I refuse to use pain pills. My doctors, they prescribe them all day long. They all know what I use for my pain. They're all okay with that, and I think everyone here needs to be. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hobbs. Next, we have Danny Ladoni.
Good evening, Danny Ladoni. I live on Ross Avenue and 10th Street. Just to echo some of the previous sentiments, it is curious to me that if I want to get a six-pack of beer, I can bike a couple of blocks and be okay, but it is quite a trek to get marijuana. I guess I would make a broader point that I recognize is above the sort of purview of this particular issue, but it does seem strange to me that we're putting an issue like this to a vote to begin with. If you don't want to use medical marijuana or recreational marijuana, don't use it. But I'm not sure why we would put to a vote what other people decide to put in their own bodies. I think it's up to each of us to make that decision, and I think we live in an age now where we have more information to be able to make our own decisions than ever before. So I certainly support any effort to make legal in Alamosa City and County what is already legal in the state, and I would encourage you to not be intimidated by those logistics, because they are in fact precisely what we need to be thinking about to make this work for all of us, rather than using that as an excuse to delay kind of further implementation of something that it sounds like many people already think we have. I know many people visit from other areas and they're like, well, I thought it was legal here. Why don't you have it on every block or somewhere like that? So I appreciate that this issue is getting your attention, and I would encourage you to move forward with the voice of the community on this. But I would also encourage you to think about just, the individual's right to be able to make that choice, because it does, I think, extend beyond what someone across the tracks might think about what we choose to do. It's our decision to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ladoni. Next up, we have Joyce Wiley.
As a business owner downtown, I've noticed over the years different types of people walking through downtown, and I don't always appreciate seeing kind of lower class people in town, and it seems like it's gotten worse and worse. I really hate to see more of that kind of stuff coming to our community, because I feel like we have a very nice community, and I don't want it to be downgraded. We've been out doing physicals at different schools, and one of the schools, they're like, it's like horrible, because they have all these shops in their town. They have more shops for marijuana than they do grocery stores, which doesn't really make sense. And, a lot of the people that have moved into the community have not been very quality. Some of the kids come to school and they're just, you can tell they've been smoking pot, and it's like, I just can't agree with that in our community, and I would really like to see our community stay a nice, clean community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wiley? Shane Hobbs. Shanae Hobbs, I'm sorry. I know you.
You do. All right, so first off, I'd like to say if anybody has any questions or any comments, feel free to interrupt me. I know I don't have a lot of time to speak. I'm not really going to address anybody else's comments only because they're on record, and you can just echo my sentiment on everybody except for Joyce Wiley. So I've got a bag here, and marijuana's kind of my bag. It's my job, it's my passion, it's my career. But also right here, I have reminders of why I'm doing this. This is to get people the option of voting for something that they want as a choice. Right now, our choices are very limited, and it seems like that's all governments want to do is limit our choices. So what I would like to see happen is a question split up among a ballot that asks for each one individually. I think that's a great idea. People can vote in or out. We also need a lot of education about what MIPS are, what kitchens are, what infused products that you can get from those kinds of places. You're welcome to ask me any questions about those. As far as compliance issues and adding additional police force, that is completely up to the city to be able to do that. First of all, when the MED receives a complaint or they observe a compliance issue, because there's 24-hour live feed to their offices. Each office has separate parts of the country that they, or the counties that they monitor. So if those compliance issues become, I guess, big enough, then they do ask local law enforcement if they can't get to it. Otherwise, there has been very few compliance issues because people spend thousands and thousands of dollars to open these businesses. They're not going to waste it on selling to a kid or on selling to someone who doesn't have a valid ID even. So for recreational centers and things like that, there are already tight controls and enforcements that y'all don't have to worry about, okay? And you're right, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's lots of models you can choose from. But the biggest thing is that you guys talk about a lot of negative input. There's also great benefits. This comes from the Pueblo paper about how they're using pot money to fix potholes. And you guys just talked about a street project, about a 7-year thing, okay? This right here gives you a good idea, a little flow chart of how many jobs that are created just from allowing a couple of those types of businesses. And you're right, all those energy things, they will go up. But most people are more concerned with paying their bills than they are how much energy they're using. And as long as they're allowed to operate and establish, then they can pay those bills. And it just adds to more jobs. So some of those things that were talked about earlier, I just felt were, you know, just limited thinking and not being able to think outside the box or about what you're actually worried about. And there are some people that are worried if this question comes up that it'll pass. And I believe it would, and that's a good thing.
Thank you, Mrs. Hobbs. Appreciate it. The last card I have is Mr. Terry Wiley.
I'm Terry Wiley. I have a business downtown. I'm a chiropractor and nutritionist. The Proposition 64 did pass. Looked like we would have another issue on the ballot, but the signatures were bought out. They wanted to put some limits of potencies and safety factors in. So with those signatures bought out, the people don't have a choice anymore. The ones who voted in wanted to probably vote to put some limits and look at it different. The maturity with which marijuana has swept into our state is not there. The depth of the way we look at some of these issues, the costs that outweigh some of the good things that it does do, the social costs are quite large. There are increased addictions. It is a gateway for more drugs. I use the Drug Free World booklet here on marijuana. This is from the Drug Enforcement Agency, the United States government, but it is truly a gateway drug. More emergency room costs are showing up in many of our cities. I get articles sent to me from the Front Range and Boulder and different large cities over there, and it does show traffic accidents are up, the police involvement, police costs are up. Illegal activity does come from there. Little research has gone into the 400 chemicals that are in marijuana. 11 of them are capable of producing a high. The other, they may have some good, I'm sure they do, but we need some real honorable, respectable research going into what's there. We need to ask the question, what are the potencies? And in the 60s, we had the 4 and 6% THC. Now our percentages, we wanted to have a bill here get on, but it's not going to. The signatures were bought out. But a 16% limit on some of the recreational. It's well above that. We know it's in the 18, 25, 30%. There's 50% THC potencies. They know how to wax it. They know how to butane it, make it up as high as 90%. Edibles are 10 times stronger than what the recreational joint of marijuana would be. And it doesn't ramp up slowly. When you take an edible and say, I don't feel anything, let me have a second. We have people coming in out of state saying, hey, I'm in Colorado, give me an edible. I don't feel anything, give me a second. Boom, that's 20 doses. The mousetrap closes. So I'm not fearful on it. I just know that it's not a choice that I make. We need more in-depth, more mature look at where marijuana is going to take us and our young people. It's a very high, expensive social costs, and we need to be aware of what those social costs are and look much deeper into it. So I would ask that we go slowly and go cautiously. You can log on to the legalization of marijuana in Colorado, the Impact, Volume 3. This is preview 2015. The Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. You could go into that website.
Thank you, Mr. Wiley.
Yes.
Appreciate your comments. We'll move on to regular business. And tonight we have a first reading on ordinance number 15, 2016. And I will ask our counselor to tell us a little bit more about it. And
Yes, Council, this ordinance is a fairly simple, straightforward ordinance to participate with an intergovernmental agreement in the coordinated election being run by the county clerk and recorder. So the ordinance is necessary and the intergovernmental agreement is necessary if you intend to put a question on the ballot. As we discussed in the work session, this meeting was called with an eye toward potentially needing to put a question on the ballot with respect to a petition that was being circulated. That petition has not been filed with sufficient signatures. You do have the option that you discussed in the work session of putting your own question on the ballot if you want to. And this is not about what that question is. This is purely authorizing intergovernmental agreement to participate in the November 8th election. If you pass it on first reading, it will go to a public hearing and second reading on the 24th of August.
thank you, Eric. Council, do we have any questions or comments on the first reading of ordinance number 15-2016? Councilor Daniel.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel like, Council, that this gives us the opportunity to make a good decision about what may be on the ballot without binding us to that at this meeting. And so I think not passing this would be I think it would be a bad decision.
Are there any other questions or comments? Councilor Vihil.
Thank you, Mayor. Eric, can we talk specifically tonight about language that would be on the ballot, or is that for another time?
Well, you could talk about it. You can't make any decisions about it. That's not on your agenda. This is the only issue that's on the agenda.
All right, thank you.
Council, let's remind ourselves that this is a first reading on this ordinance. And I think we've had opportunity to go through that through the ordinance and the IGA backup material. And so, Councilor Coleman.
Mayor, I have a question for Eric, if you don't mind. this whole process, to me, it seems like we're being pressured and rushed into making choices and decisions. So I'm just curious, in regards to timing, if we don't talk about some of the language right now and we do pass this ordinance, how much time will we have to discuss what we may list on the ballot?
Well, you have a lot of meetings coming up. So you have this is a special meeting. You have your regular meeting coming up on August 17th. You could put that on the agenda for your August 17th meeting. I will not be here for that, nor will Holly, but you could do that. You can also discuss it at your August 24th meeting, which is when we were planning on having it on your agenda to do a resolution. You do have in your materials for this meeting a draft resolution that was dealing with a tax question and an alternative question to the petition question. But that draft resolution didn't take into account any of the discussion that happened tonight, obviously, because it was before tonight. You can use that to think about, and you could certainly tonight direct me to come up with some proposed language for you to take a look at. I can do that tomorrow or Friday, and you could mull it over before your meeting on the 24th. So you have all kinds of options.
Okay, thank you. Is there a deadline with the county in regards to having the proper wording in place
Yes.
that we're going to have to deal with? Because I'm really trying to make sure that we utilize and maximize this time today to be as effective as possible so we're not pressured into making decisions in the future.
Yes, the deadline for certifying the ballot question to the county clerk and recorder is September 8th.
Okay. So really, we really should probably at least consider the thoughts of
7th,
talking
I'm sorry,
about
September
what
7th.
actions. The 7th? Okay, the first week in September. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
so if you wanted to talk, about, well, gee, are you interested in 4 separate questions or 3 separate questions or 2 separate questions, you could certainly do that and tell me to go think about that and give you some proposed language to look at your upcoming meetings.
Councilor Grego.
You keep talking about a draft resolution that we're supposed to have. Where's that at?
It's in the Novus, it's not printed off, so it's in your Novus materials for this meeting.
Oh, okay.
It's in the work session portion.
Councilor Grego.
Oh, that's the comment I have. Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry.
So we want to have any more discussion on maybe some of the parameters we'd like to look at, or maybe more questions of staff? Councilor Coleman.
Yes, sir, Mayor. I think we should utilize this time to have as much discussion as needed at this particular time if council is willing. That way we can at least go back and study more and be more prepared when we have our next meeting. Eric, you mentioned earlier that there's a draft resolution. Is there any way you could read it to council and explain it to us so we'll understand it?
I think you can pull it up, too. I'll have to fire up my computer, which I have. Oh, Holly has it. Let me. So the draft resolution, I can skip all the whereases, blah, 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 blah.
Is it?
Scroll on down. Keep on scrolling. Keep on. There's a lot of blah, 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 blah.
Is this,
It proposed 3 ballot questions, the first of which was the language out of the petition. The second of which was a referred ballot question from you. Shall the city of Alamosa allow the establishment and operation of all types of facilities requiring a license from the state of Colorado Marijuana Enforcement Division under the Colorado Medical Marijuana Code or the Colorado Retail Marijuana Code, including but not limited to medical marijuana centers, marijuana cultivation facilities, marijuana product manufacturing facilities, marijuana testing facilities, and retail marijuana stores, subject to appropriate local licensing and regulation. The third was a tax question. Shall the taxes of the city of Alamosa be increased by, and you can pick this number out of thin air, which is what I did, $500,000, in the first fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2017, and by such amount as are raised annually thereafter, by imposing an additional sales tax of 10% on the sale of marijuana and marijuana products, both medical and retail, and an excise tax of 10% of the average market rate of unprocessed marijuana, both medical and retail, on the date that it is first sold or transferred from a marijuana cultivation facility to a medical marijuana facility, retail, blah, 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 only in the event that such facilities are permitted in the city of Alamosa based upon an affirmative vote of the qualified electors of the city. So that's the way those were structured. And in further thinking about this, both in our discussion tonight and prior to our discussion tonight, I agree with the notion of deciding, or separating these various facility components out into separate questions, and not necessarily all 4 or 5. You can do whichever ones you think is appropriate. And then also with respect to the tax, of putting the tax in each question. So the question reads, shall retail marijuana facilities be allowed with a 10% sales tax? Shall cultivation facilities be allowed with a 10% excise tax? Fill in your percentage number. But that kind of form of question is what I would think would make some sense, and I could certainly work on getting some language put together that you can have to review.
Thank you, Eric. Councilor Grego?
Question, I'm sorry. So the tax part of it would have to be in the form of a question. We couldn't take that moratorium period and establish an amount of tax.
Well, you can only put a taxation question to the voters on a November election. So
No, but at that time, you put a tax question on it, which you have to put an amount.
no, and other cities have done this, you could say up to 10%,
Okay.
but you do have to put an upper limit on it.
An amount.
And you do have to put what your estimated revenues from it would be.
So, for example, if right now the city's collecting, what is it, 7.9 as far as sales tax?
Well, the city doesn't collect
I
that.
mean, well, the community out there.
The total sales tax, well, Ruthie's here, she could tell us, but
It's I think it's 7.9.
7.9.
Okay, so it would be 7.9, and taking your example of 10%, would be above that, or how does that work?
Added on to that, yeah.
So you're looking at 17.9 tax? Would you add both of those, or how does that work?
I'm trying to remember my high school math. Yes, I think it would be 17.9. It would be an additional tax on top of
Okay.
the already existing sales tax.
Oh, okay. All
But,
right. Thank you.
okay, a question, Eric, now, this would be a sales tax solely collected by the city, correct? Or would it be a sales tax that is collected by both the county and the city in
No.
the 60-40 split?
That's right. It would be solely by the city. There is a state sales tax on marijuana as well. That would also be collected.
And that would be added as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a lot of tax that gets slapped
Counselor-
on marijuana.
Councilor Daniel?
Thank you. Eric, so I do think you drafting some language, I would be in favor of that with the separate things and some definitions around what kind of businesses those would look like. Just because I do feel like I think I know, and then I hear more and I'm not sure that I know. And so some definitions would be helpful for me. And then I'm wondering about, so combining the question with the tax, we could say up to 10% like some of the other communities have done. When would we get to change that? Would that be at council discretion then, that it would like start at 5 and then go up, or what would that happen then?
Correct. That would be at council discretion, and you couldn't go over that, but you could go under it.
Councilor Vihil?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple things. One, I appreciate Mr. Coleman's comments about let's really talk about this tonight and get going. and it kind of coincides with Ms. Brown's comment of let's get after it and really iron this thing out. So I'll get the ball rolling a little bit with what Ms. Daniel had said too. I also agree that we should have each type on the ballot. However, and I'm basing this off of what our police chief said. I don't know if Alamosa is ready to handle, I don't know if our police is ready to handle, if we have staff ready to handle manufacturing or cultivation. So that's where I stand, and I would like maybe to see if we had separate recreational or medical. And then as I mentioned in the work session, over time, we can look at and talk about and put to a vote again or something of that nature, cultivation and manufacturing.
And while I'm drafting one, I can draft all four, so you don't need to make that decision tonight.
Okay. Councillor Hensley.
Well, I agree. I like the idea of splitting them up in four, and I think that idea of what Councillor Vigil says is the idea of it also gives us time then to do our own homework for the next week or so to decide, do we want to necessarily present all four, but at least if we have them there to look at, and then we can start really looking at what we want to present. And so we've done a little homework to see, so some of those concerns, so I agree. And then it seems to me on the tax side of it, I guess it reminds me, because I do believe like cigarettes and gas and all of that, they have quite a bit of taxes that I guess they're underlying, but we just assume now, that they're just there. So this kind of falls under that, is that correct? Where there's a lot of extra taxes that's in the cost?
Right, so there are many commodities that have other taxes other than simply a sales tax, that's true.
Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor. Eric, can you help me out a little bit too, as far as clarifying how this would work? Let's say we do a split issue, questions, at least 4 different questions, and put 4 different questions on the ballot. When we send these questions out to the voters and they vote on these 4 different questions, how do we determine which ones get passed and which ones are not passed if everybody's voting on 4 different things?
Well, you take each one as it comes. So question 1 either passes or it doesn't. Question 2 either passes or it doesn't.
So it's possible that we can have maybe 2 out of 4 questions passed or 3 out of 4, all 4 passed. I'm just trying to get clarification.
Right, right.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Grego.
Going back to the ordinance, Eric, does this really, if we pass this on tonight, does it put us where let's say we have a hearing, it doesn't put us in any kind of position where it could still be defeated, correct? Or does it put us where, this is mostly alerting the county that there might be a possible question? Or does this really, it puts the question?
First, on first reading tonight, it doesn't really do anything at all other
Okay.
than enables you to have it cross that low threshold like any first reading. Just because you pass something on first reading doesn't mean you're going to pass it on second reading.
Okay.
And Holly was showing me, she had an email from the county clerk saying, well, as far as timing goes, if I haven't heard from you by August 30th on the IGA, I'll assume you're not participating in the election. So she's pretty flexible with the timing.
So August 30th, huh? She
Well,
said
that's-
August 30th?
August 30th is our deadline for
Sure.
entering into an IGA, which is why first reading tonight, second reading August 24th, will enable us to meet that deadline.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
And as a point of clarification, Eric, council has the ability to limit the number of questions, yes or no, from the 4 you've decided to, or we've decided that we want written up. In other words, if council feels that manufacturing is probably not in the best interest, can we scratch that from the resolution or from the ordinance?
Sure. From the
Okay.
resolution.
So we can limit it to 1 or 2 or maybe all 4 questions? Yes.
Sure, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor. And Eric, I want to thank you for giving us the draft and the outline of the 4 questions. And think it would be very helpful if we decide to go with the split route. Just ask, like I mentioned earlier in the work session, from talking with the people in the community, they just ask that we keep it as simple as possible when we are putting these questions to the voters. So
You don't think these are simple? Taxation questions are difficult, I guess, and the reason for that is Tabor has some very strict formulaic rules, but I will bear that in mind.
thank you, sir.
Thank you, Council. Any other comments or questions? Councilor Daniel.
If there are no other comments about the first reading of the ordinance, I would like to move that we approve upon first reading ordinance number 15, 2016, which is an ordinance approving an intergovernmental agreement with Alamosa County for conduct of the November 8th, 2016 coordinated election for presentation of ballot issues relating to marijuana and marijuana taxation, and to be set for public hearing on Wednesday, August 24th.
I second.
I've got a motion and a second. Are there any other comments or questions? If not, start voting, please. Ms. Hawley?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. And with that, our regular business is concluded, and I will adjourn this meeting. Meeting adjourned.